I want to go to the next experiment. We're going to do a picnic roundtable discussion. So with Janet Godsell, Sikko Zoer from Medtronic, and Jeroen van Weesep from Lego, we'll have a discussion and we will follow up upon the presentation of Janet. So please join me, Sikko, and hopefully Lego will join.
It's a nice table.
So normally we would sit around the table with the four of us, but hopefully Janet and Jeroen from Weesep from Lego will join digitally. So let's wait and enjoy the picture. Yeah, here you are. Okay. All right. Janet, thanks again for your presentation. To introduce you, the one who you haven't seen today earlier, but I have, that's Jeroen van Weesep from Lego, VP of Innovation in Supply Chain. Could you explain, Jeroen, what your role is within Lego at first?
Yes, sure. So, Jeroen van Weesep, I have been with the Lego Group for 10 years. And 3 years ago, we actually recognized that there is so much work to do in supply chain that would protect our competitiveness, but also use digitalization and move us forward. Now, traditionally in supply chains, we're all about control and execution excellence. So we set up a separate business unit to drive that innovation in three areas. One, it's around productivity, efficiency, and responsiveness. So very much in the operation. The other one is around the integrated planning processes, and the third one is actually around capabilities of building products differently. And if you think of Lego, you could imagine that our product developers are told you can make anything as long as it's a brick. And we can do lots of things around that brick that would keep the product very appealing. So that's what the product capability or the production capabilities are about.
Okay, thanks. So like Janet explained in her research, there are different archetypes, 4 archetypes. So my first question to Medtronic and then to Lego is, do you recognize yourself in one of those 4 archetypes? Are you a laggard, integrator, and what is it? A technophile or a pathfinder? Yeah. So Sikko, how do you describe Medtronic in the 4 archetypes?
Well, I'm definitely not a pathfinder, that's for sure. I think to be fair, I think we're still a laggard. We have ambitions to do things differently, to do things better. We also set up for ourselves for the first time this year some goals on carbon, to become carbon neutral in 2030. But it tells you also that we still have a way to go, absolutely.
And Lego, how do you describe Lego in those 4 archetypes?
Yeah, that's not an easy question, but I would say Lego has really started the journey to be an integrator. We have declared that we recognize that we're in the world of plastics. We are looking at alternative materials that would allow reuse, remanufacture, but also secondary use. And then internally, we are doing a lot of process optimization to recognize that our own supply chain has a carbon footprint, not just inside Lego, but in the extended supply chain.
Now, getting back to Medtronic, you presented what you have done, especially in the last 12 months, with a digital twin and a control tower. So that's related to all some initiative Janet has explained. But did you tie that in with the sustainability or carbon emission and that kind of stuff, or not so much?
No, absolutely. It's now. So I said, we basically, when I look at where we are today, I think we are on laggard, but we have ambitions. And within supply chain, I really like what Janet was saying about, supply chain can take control. We could have a severe or big influence on the decision making within the company. And what we did within Medtronic and Medtronic supply chain is take sustainability as one of those business criteria, business conditions that should be and is today considered when we make a decision in changes in our network or whatever. So it's absolutely on our roadmap, and it's become a more predominant factor than it was ever before.
And getting to the paths to follow from laggard to pathfinders, there are two paths to follow. The one of industrial digital technology, the expensive one, or the integrated one. Which path to follow for Medtronic?
I think the supply chain integration one.
Okay, and you really explained about it. You have done a lot on that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The road and the path to follow on Lego. Do you have any ideas when you saw the presentation by Janet? Jeroen?
Janet, what do you think?
So I was quite impressed. So some of the real step to supply chain integration is really about moving from functionally siloed internally to creating this end-to-end business process. And before you said you're an integrator, when you described the types of initiatives that you were doing, then I could, my ears pricked up and I thought, wow, that's really good examples of an organization that's doing the right types of things to move them down that path. Now, interestingly, the piece of research that we did with Blue Yonder in 2018, which looked at supply chain digital readiness, the scary thing about that, I think it identified only about 13% of organizations in 2018 were at a level 3, which meant that they had integrated their end-to-end supply chain and used digital technologies to do that. But the scarier thing was that by 2021, only 31% of organizations had thought that they would be at that level of being able to use supply chain digitization to optimize the end-to-end. And I think this is because the single biggest difficulty for organizations is internally to move from a siloed organization, but then to break down those silos with their customers and their suppliers. And so I think truly if we can tackle that integration challenge, then talking to some of your points around, you'll improve productivity, you'll improve resilience, and you'll improve sustainability, and it will be a step change improvement. Just one other point though, I was also really interested in what you said, that you'd set up a separate business unit. So again, the organizations that we'd seen from our supply chain digital readiness work that were perhaps experimenting with new business models, and that's really from a sustainability perspective where you'll see the true transformation, they had all done it through setting up a separate business unit. Unless they were a startup, when in essence the new business is the new business model. And I think that's because if you've got a legacy business, you need to protect your cash flow and you need to protect that business. But also I think, as you alluded to, and it would be interesting to hear more from you on this, about your sort of startup, you need a different culture and mentality.
Getting back to and Lego.
Yeah. There's definitely some clear hints there. I think what I described is still a fairly traditional focus on the supply chain and what it does for the existing business. So as an example, the way Lego has developed as a company, we have a lot of bespoke and legacy IT platforms that prevent us from doing something simple as, okay, could we measure our CO2 footprint around the globe without a lot of manual interaction? So inspired by your talk, I was thinking, how do we get to measures that are more revealing on the total cost of and cost, not just in the financial sense, but also in terms of our footprint? How do we? So yes, we have a very integrated culture where collaboration and if you want, cross-departmental work is already quite advanced. Yet at the same time, the systems and the process flows are sometimes still very scattered. And one of the things that I would love to consider is, so what is the wise next step? Because introduction of measures that are much more sustainability oriented is still in the sustainability department. It's still in the consultancy space. And I think that's a big step that we should take and talk about CO2 and footprint much more.
Related to what Janet was telling us, so in Utopia, in the flourishing world, we will have more distributed manufacturing. Now looking at Lego, you open up a factory in China, so that's becoming a bit more local. But how do you look at Lego in the next 5 to 10 years, in 2035? How will it look like for Lego to manufacture and distribute your bricks?
Yeah, actually, Lego is quite an exceptional company in that we have very few factories. Now, the toy industry typically produces everything in China and ships it in sea containers to the Western world. Lego has effectively 5 factories close to the market, but for example, for Europe, this is only one really giant factory in Czech Republic. And what we currently do is we have a distribution network that is matching the responsiveness required from our customers, and I see a lot of change happening there. Right, so the centralized inventories need to be distributed more and better, and very efficiently. Right, so it would be easy to say build a few more warehouses, but that is not going to help. So I expect that we will have much more dynamic inventory management across the nodes of the network to deal with multi-channel, but also consider environmental impact. And I do see that we would start thinking about what are the types of recycling and potentially even reuse of the activities and products that we produce. It's hard to predict where that's going, but that is certainly something that we are thinking about.
Sikko, what about Medtronic? Do you also move into the direction of more distributed manufacturing, local manufacturing in that spaces? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think today when you look at our manufacturing network, a lot of our portfolio is still single sourced even. So there's a reason anyway to look at a manufacturing strategy, also from a business continuity perspective. But also our strategy is more and more local for local. That's an ask of our customer base, so it's a customer demand that's coming in. There are other reasons for that, like regulatory constraints. You see the impact of the trade wars today, and how do you avoid this? But also sustainability is one of those drivers. And I don't think that sustainability will be the key driver for a change in our manufacturing strategy, but it will be absolutely one of the more important criteria on which we make decisions going forward regarding our manufacturing footprint.
Thanks. Janet mentioned a great example of HP. So my question would be, who would be your examples to look for, leading the way in sustainability? And do you really connect with these kind of companies? So Jeroen, Janet mentioned HP. So is it an example, and what can you learn from them?
Well, it's definitely an example. So we have connected with them in the very early considerations around what would it mean if you place the idea of remanufacture, recycling in an existing model where, well, as probably most of you know, we don't take Lego bricks back because people keep them all of their lives, but eventually they actually end up in landfill or they do generate a footprint. So for us, it's very, very early days, but we're trying to think beyond the borders of Lego so that we don't invent our own wheel and rather participate in a bigger ecosystem of how we can deal with these issues, for example, on a European level.
So I can imagine that the HP is recycling keyboards and all other hardware with a lot of hard plastics. Lego is also in the area of hard plastics. So, Jenna, what would your recommendation be if you have recognized certain pathfinders who are maybe in your area, your industry, or adjacent industries? What would be your recommendation to address or to approach these pathfinders?
So I think true pathfinders, so HP, they make a lot of information about what they do available. And actually, Martijn, as you know, you are very good at connecting people that have leading practice with others. However, equally, so something like hard plastic, as some of the professors that I work with in WMG will tell me, the fact that a Lego brick's made from a hard plastic, which means it's probably pretty indestructible, it then says it's the ideal product for the circular economy. So perhaps it might be a different solution for Lego. So I think about, my sons have boxes and boxes of it. They're 18 and 16 now. So I've put my Lego in the loft for the grandchildren. I have thousands of bricks, but what will happen is that they'll then want a particular kit to build a particular house, or I've got houses that they've built and then they've got smashed up, and now somewhere or another, all those bricks are hidden away in a big box of other bricks. So maybe the new business model for Lego is about, it could be that they don't produce any more bricks. They just help people to use the bricks that are already in circulation much, much better.
I heard last week that you can put your old Lego bricks in a washing machine. You use a pillow and another pillow, and you can do it in a washing machine. So your Lego bricks from 20 years old will be as new. Something to add on your side, Jeroen?
Yeah, I can absolutely add. You can try this one at home.
Okay, right. But again,
but Martijn, I perhaps.
Yeah.
So I had a vision of I could go to somewhere and put my Lego bricks into a sorter, and it tells me, with these bricks you've got, these are the things you could make. So I don't need to buy more bricks.
Yeah, but you can make anything out of Lego.
I maybe pay for the designs.
But you can
but
make
some people like to follow plans.
Yeah.
So I think we've just generated a project that could be called Lego for the Next Generation, and what is quite interesting is that we have looked at digitalizing, for example, building instructions, and if we could offer a sorting mechanism, right? So is there a way that people with big boxes in their basement could actually sort the bricks so you could rebuild old models? That is definitely something that is of interest.
Interesting part, what Jenna was mentioned about Clock Speed by Charles Fine, MIT professor, great book, everybody should read it, Clock Speed. So design for supply chain. Within Medtronic, I can imagine if you are redesigning your network and more localizing your manufacturing, that's an opportunity to, redesign all your products. So what kind of endeavors do you have in that space to, do 3D engineered products for supply chain?
Yeah, well, of course, it's a huge opportunity. But I think, as I mentioned before, sustainability becomes more and more important. But, you need also to be realistic. If you are medical devices, it's about, the patient and how do you provide more comfort to the patient and elevate pain, extend life, etc., etc. That's our mission. But for sure, we need to make sure that we do it more in a sustainable way. So designing for supply chain is one of the themes that becomes more and more important. The materials that we use, the packaging that we use, for example, is one of those topics that's coming up for discussion now in Medtronic. How can we do this different? But I also believe, that sustainability is a key element. And maybe that's why I disagree a little bit with Janet. Sustainability will be really, really important going forward. Will be one of those key business criteria on which you may make your business decision. But I'm not sure it will be the leading criteria going forward. And maybe I'm wrong. But there are also other things that you still need to continue to consider.
And another thing is what Janet has mentioned. Instead of selling your systems, you can now rent out the systems, and you create it. Well, it maintains in your own portfolio, or whatever. Is that something to move forward for Medtronic?
Well, I'm not sure how you can rent out a pacemaker, but
well, maybe.
Well, no, but it's.
Oh, Janet.
But you do, don't you? So my son's a type 1 diabetic, and one of the biggest innovations so a diabetic pump is a very expensive piece of kit. He has one that lasts 4 years and then it's replaced. But one of the biggest selling diabetic pumps for young people is something called an Omnipod, which is a bit more based on like an espresso system, where it's a single-use insulin pump, and when you're finished with it, you send it back to be remanufactured. And so you get your set of insulin pumps, and it's a closed loop. It's a bit like the HP Instant Ink model. Now, I'm sure it wouldn't work necessarily for all medical devices, but I think there is some market, for instance, with pacemakers, that they do have I know that there's regulatory issues to overcome, but they do go on to be used in other countries.
Yeah, well, I don't think you're going to use an explanted pacemaker in another patient, honestly. But there are huge opportunities also in the medical device space when you look at reverse logistics and circular processes. You know, there's a lot of instruments today that are indeed single-use and also, you know, have also market authorization for single-use. And there are discussions going on to change those market authorizations so that you can, you know, reuse them afterwards. You know, I talked, for example, in my presentation about staplers as an example. You know, staplers is something that you could reuse multiple times, of course, and that's something that absolutely the industry is looking into. Again, you know, you need to be very conscious about, you know, where are your opportunities, and go for those opportunities, in my opinion, are most realistic, and definitely not the pacemaker to have a reusable pacemaker at this stage.
You know, we have seen a lot of startups and scale-up pitching today, and Jeroen is part of the jury of the startup contest, so you have also been involved of the assessment of the 4 finalists, Jeroen, and later also to Sikko. You know, have you seen any startups that might be of interest for your company, for Lego, on a sustainability matter?
Well, I think at the moment, right, so if I come back to us being in the integrator space, any simple ways of creating more transparency, identifying losses, and particularly expressing losses in terms of our environmental impact may be very relevant. And one of the reasons they become so relevant is that in this innovation unit that I'm running, the most quoted bottleneck is probably the IT infrastructure. And we are in a nearly 100-year-old company. Our IT is running our day-to-day operations, so we're not going to stop it and redo it, right? So any shortcuts in that space will be highly relevant. And then the one thing during the conversation that I thought about was the advances in 3D printing and additive manufacturing are very, very relevant to both what materials we can produce with as well as where we can produce. And just to quote a small example, we've been thinking about a potential business model, right? So this is not an existing one, but a potential business model where you sell a standard Lego box, but actually you have a 3D printer much closer to the market, no real factory, at least not at the Lego size, but the consumer is able to order a bespoke piece or a personalized piece from a local Lego supplier, which would keep the product alive and would have a much smaller footprint than we currently have. So those are the types of innovations that I think are relevant in the integration stage. And I think, you know, if there was a magic way of reducing carbon footprint across the network, that would be interesting also.
I know that Lego is working together with Adidas, so the example mentioned by Janet. So there are new sneakers with Lego parts in it, and I know that Adidas is doing 3D printing of sneakers. Can't Adidas 3D print the Lego blocks in this same sneaker?
Currently, they cannot do that at the right Lego quality, Martijn.
Because they don't have the IP of the brick.
No, because it's technically not possible yet.
Okay, interesting.
As far as I know. So the startup that can do that can come and see me.
All right.
But let's be clear also, there is a lot of technology advancement at the moment. So, you know, when you talk about 3D printing, one of our business lines is in the spine business. I always say, you know, all the screws and rods, etc., that you can put in your spine. But you know, we are really looking into 3D printing of titanium implants over there, and you know, so the technology will help us also. Technology advancement will really help us also to become more sustainable, in my opinion. And when you start reimagining that, then there is a lot of opportunities.
Have you seen any startups that would, are able to help you to move forward on the sustainability path today?
For today,
Yeah.
I think the one, what was it, Big Mile?
Okay.
I think that's one, because you know what I think, what is especially when, and this is more on the the carbon footprint that you have, is you know how do I get the data? How do I get the visibility, transparency about how my supply chain is performing? And that's a big problem, and a big challenge for most companies. You know, I talked about the digital twin, and of course the digital twin will help us to optimize, but how do I get that data? And I think that's, for example, startups like Big Mile could maybe use us in that, could help us in that area.
Sikko, Jeroen, thank you for your participation in this. Janet, are you satisfied of these two examples, Medtronic and Lego, that they will help to get us to an utopia, to a not so disturbing future?
I think so. I think it's true. Sustainability isn't the only thing that we've got to consider. I think at the end of the day, it's about making those trade-offs between cost, quality, time, and carbon. But there's no doubt that if we continue to couple consumption and production and not think about better ways of doing things, we're just going to run out of materials and we're going to end up in a dystopian world.
Thank you for participating. Thank you, Sikko. Please be seated. Thank you, Janet, and thank you for Jeroen for your participation and also for your membership as a jury. And next we're going to announce the winners of the startup and the scale-up contest. Thank you.